I was telling a story of this Chan master, Zen master. Zen is a pronunciation of Chan. Chan came from China. Emerged in the tradition around 7th, 8th century. Went to Japan in the 12th century. They pronounced the word Zen. And now Zen comes to America. So it's basically the same. So this Chan master, he was posed a question. He thinks meditation is the way to become a Buddha, become fully awakened. So he sat all day in meditation. And his teacher said, basically they had some dialogue, and his teacher said, if you're in a horse cart, if the cart doesn't move, you have a whip, right? Do you hit the horse or you hit the cart? It's a silly question. The cart, horse cart, or you hit the horse. Right? Similarly, when we practice, it's about transforming our minds, transforming our perspective, transforming our appraisal, as opposed to engaging in some kind of physical work. And similarly, when someone is angry at you, that person is under the influence of vexations. The person is vexed. Are you angry at the person? If someone blames you for something that you didn't do, and you're defensive, you get angry. Are you angry at the person? Please raise your hand. Good. It's natural. Right? But if I, what is this? If I take a stick, in the Zen tradition, we have something called a warning stick, a stick of compassion. If I take a stick and if I hit you, you get angry at me or you get angry at the stick? You get angry at me. I hit you for no reason. Same thing. When a person is under the influence of vexations, Rano, and he scolds at you or project onto you something that's totally not you, you didn't even do it. Why should you get angry at the person? That's like being angry at a stick. At that time, that person is no longer himself or herself. That person is under the influence of vexations, emotional afflictions. He's just like a puppet. So the real enemy is not actually that person, it's actually the vexations. Do you see that analogy? No. But we take it personally. We can't see beyond the veil of that person saying words or doing certain things. But there's a whole complex reason behind that. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but the point here is that we take things personally. We personalize things. And we generate stress. Something related to us. Someone can even look at you a certain way, and you can generate a whole story about it. And it's only becomes stressful, the third point. It becomes stressful because it exceeds your perceived resources for coping. For example, if you see a snake in this room now, it would be a source of stress. You would be shocked. You would kind of fight or flight reaction would be generated. Right? But if a person is actually, snake catcher, oh great, cobra. I've been looking for one of those to collect in my collection of pets for a long time, they wouldn't be able to generate stress. So stress already over here in this definition is not something that just happened to me. You know, that co-worker, you know, this work situation, that family member, my mom, my dad, my friends. It's only when you appraise it as stress, your perception. 2, you have a personal interest in it. 3, you don't have the resources to cope with it. Because if you have the resources to deal with it, it's not a stress. You understand that? Right? Cognitive. Stress is always contextual, involving many people, dynamically, in different situations. You know, it's a process. And like the relational, it's contingent on cognitive appraisal, coping. The mechanism what you use to cope with the situation. This is good news, because this means that if you have strategies and techniques and methods to manage it, that means stress level can be reduced. Or you can have a way to change your perception of it, your appraisal of it. Stress levels can be reduced. If we perceive it as threat or harm, some situation, something harmful to us, or if we perceive it as opportunity, a challenge, your perception of it is very different. Right? And your whole experience of it is very different. How many of you have kids? Okay? Sometime, or how many of you have contacted kids? Everyone's hand has to be raised. Come in contact with kids. When you see kids doing different kind of things, it's kind of funny sometimes. Or the kids start to play with you, pulling your hair or doing something. You don't take it as a, or the kid, I remember, you know, there's a certain phase in the developmental process, and kids are very fascinated with poo-poo. You know that? They're very fascinated with their own poop and pee, and they start to call everything poo-poo. Or like, I remember my friend's child, he's a little boy, he's at the perfect age where he's really into that. You know? And he loved to run around naked and show off his naked body to like visiting friends. Some friends come and take off, like, yeah, run around kind of in the living room and come back. He's just really fascinated with that. Right? Now when we experience that, because our perception is different, it's only a kid. Our expectations are different. Our appraisal is different. The whole context is different. We wouldn't necessarily become stressful. Now, if your husband, your friends come over, or your friend take the pen and says, oh, start to go around, that experience will be very different. Right? So everything is contextual. No. But there's another way to understand it. And that is kind of biological. We as a human species have survived primarily because we have learned from stress. And most of the mechanism of stress is beneath the surface of our consciousness, the way that we are wired to do. the way that human beings have evolved. Right? Here I'd like to point out in a simplified form the mechanism of stress on a biological level. Now this happens unconsciously. Unconsciousness here does not mean in the Freudian sense of unconscious. Like something was conscious, and then because of great trauma, we suppress it down to our depth of our conscious. It doesn't mean that kind of unconscious. It literally means the way that we are wired, our brain is wired together. The way that the brain actually simulates certain situations before it becomes cognitively aware. We can be aware of it. Okay? And so stress is not necessarily bad. It has helped us. Living in a situation that was very stressful, right? In the evolutionary process, predators, hunger, meeting dangers, how to survive in a certain way. Body, the mechanism of the body are activated in a particular way based on the processes the brain absorb different information. Right? We'll talk about this. Neurologists generally agree, and this is of course generalizing it, that the limbic center, which is the core section in here where I'm pointing, is the emotional seat of many of our reactions. There are several parts in this center here. And the executive seat, the place where we make rational decisions, it's at the prefrontal cortex in this region. And the way they found out is basically through section by section. This is a long process, through many tests on animals, lobotomy, removing different part of the brain, and see if that still affects the IQ or affects the emotion. You remove one part, their IQ is totally not affected, but the way they process things become changed, so they start to test out. Western science is very good at locating, mapping different regions, right, and finding all the functions of it. So the problem with this is that the executive seat, the prefrontal cortex, usually process things quite slower than the emotive seat. Right? And they also say that when something is perceived out here, the retina perceives, through the light and everything, information is sent from the retina to what's back here, the occipital cortex, which is the visual cortex. The function of this part of the brain is actually to simulate the actual event, objects that's perceived by the eyes. In fact, the amount of information needed to simulate what we actually see is very few. It doesn't need that much information. It's able to fill in all the blanks. And each and every one of you, in this very moment, are doing that. For example, Chris is sitting here. He doesn't have to actually see who's behind for his brain to get a spatial sense of someone is sitting behind him. How the room is over here to his left, room to his right, there's people behind him, and there's people in front of him. He has peripheral vision, but it doesn't really reach back there, but his brain knows that. He has a spatial sense of where he is now, sitting in relation to the room. Where do you think that information comes from? Your brain doesn't need to actually look at the information in order to fill in the details. Your brain based on its past memory,